Okay, so this is a bit also of patchwork video. It's not an episode, it's like a bonus material thing for my podcast episode, because that ended up being really long when I was talking about all these books. And had I realized I was going to do an extra episode, as it turns out I did with this, I would have just gone more in depth with all the books, but I unfortunately have not, did not realize until I had talked about half the books that this would take forever and I should make a separate video for it. So this is the bonus material for episode 20, and yeah, I'm just going to talk about the books. I'm going to go over them in a way that's kind of brief but kind of detailed. Part of that is just because you have to pay for these books, so I can't really show you that much, but the other reason is, well, I didn't realize I was going to make a separate video for it, and there are many books, so I'm going to talk more about this at the end of the episode as well. But if there's anything you want to know specifically about these books, ask me and I can cover them more in depth in a future episode. I'd be happy to do that. I'd probably be able to say more about those books if I can do that without having lots of other books that I know I have to cover as well. So let's get started. I have a lot of knitting books. I got half of them here and the other half in Norway, and I'm trying to get more of them here now because this is where I live, and I think I'm going to be here more and more than in Norway from now on. And I'm going to try to mention which languages these books are available in and kind of how I think about them. And I'm going to go through them in the order of book height, because just that's how they are on my shelf. And strangely, it seems to correlate with how much I like them. So I'm going to go through them a bit sort of briefly and list-wise at first, but then I'm going to go more into depth the more I know the book. So if you feel like I'm being a bit self-descriptive in the beginning, it's just because I don't know those books that well. So this is just a little booklet from Kirsten Kapur, I think that's how I say, Kirsten. And she makes shawls, and she's brilliant with shawls. And I made one of the shawls here already, which is the Andrea shawl. Here it is. And the only thing I want you to be aware of this is that she gives different sizes for her shawls, but even the largest one is actually fairly average. So if you're going to make one of the smaller ones, just be aware it's not going to be very big. And if you want something that's bigger than the larger ones, then you might have to play around with the stitch count and do a bit of maths. But overall, like, Kirsten Kapur is one of the queens of shawls. She's just incredibly good at it. You could never really go wrong with her patterns, in my opinion. I do sort of don't quite share her taste in colours. Like, I think these colours are very tasteful, but many of the colours chosen in this book I don't quite agree with. But I find that very inspiring, because I feel like I could sort of take those shawls to the next level with colours that are more suitable for my style. So I really do like this. It's kind of misleading that it's called the Book of Shawls when it's clearly not a book, but that was just something like my expectations until seeing it in the shop. I'm like, oh, it's a bit smaller. Oh, very well. So here we have Loops 10, and this is the most recent addition to my book collection. I just bought it because I had to get some Shillister yarn because it's being discontinued from Loop, and there's a shawl in here that is for that. I did show you this in the last episode, but it's the autumn leaf shawl, and it's gorgeous. That's what I want to make. But generally it's just full of pattern from really prolific designers. I mean, Stephen West, Kirsten Kapur, Isolde Teague, yeah, just plenty that I'm sure you would be interested to knit from. And it's just a 10th anniversary book from Loop, so they got lots of designers together to make patterns for this book. So I believe this is the Stephen West shawl, and it's really cool to see it presented in a sort of Loop context, because Loop has a very particular style, as you can see on this book. You can check it out more on Ravelry. I don't really know much about this book yet. It's a bit far away from my aesthetics in terms of knitting. It doesn't have that much color work in it. There's one just at the back here. It's a cowl or like cape, but generally I just bought this, so I can't really say much about it. I just really look forward to knitting that shawl, because I've seen it hanging up in Loop, and it's just all I ever want from a small shawl. So this is one of my colourwork heroes, Mary Jane Mucklestone. She's got one book on Fair Isle knitting and one book on Scandinavian knitting, which I really do appreciate. I really do appreciate her making this distinction. And you can just see it on the covers why Fair Isle and other colourworks are not the same. This is a very clear Fair Isle book. You can see it's sort of striping with the ever-changing background and foreground colours. There are other differences as well, but the technique is the same. It's all stranded knitting. And this is a Scandinavian book. It's very typical for Scandinavian knitting to just have one background color and a foreground color, and they're very often black and white, sometimes blue and white, sometimes red and white, but generally we're not that playful with colors as they are in the Faroe Isles. It's a nice, they have really good overviews of the patterns. I'll just show you, like, you just get to see them like this and you can just go look for them and see what more you could do with them. I love these books. They are such a great resource if you want to put together patterns yourself, because like they're based on historical stuff. It's just such a resource. I love this. I'm so happy I got them. If she was to ever make more of these, it would be an instant purchase, honestly. These and Alice Starmore's book are must-haves, and it's kind of embarrassing for me to admit I don't have any Alice Starmore books yet. I was very close to buying some at least, but I'm on a budget, you guys. So I wish I could talk about this at length, but we have a lot more books to go through, I'm afraid. I was going to go through languages as well. The books I've gone through so far are, to my knowledge, only available in English. However, I know this one has been translated into Norwegian. I don't know about the other one. It might not be, it might be in the future. They're in the same series, so it wouldn't be so strange if that were to happen. And these books are, to my knowledge, only in English. They are by Nancy Bush, one on folk knitting in Estonia and one about sock knitting in sort of folk knitting context as well. They are part history books, part pattern books, technique books. I have not looked into them in depth yet, just kind of browsing through it. It's just one of my sort of coffee table books. I got them through Dana in our first swap, and I'm so grateful for them because they're right up my alley. I mean, look at them. It's just so me, it's kind of embarrassing. So yeah, I really do like them, but there's limited, there's very little that I could say about them right now. I would recommend them based on what I know though. Okay, so these are books that I got from Norway. Both of them are by Bitta Mikkelborg. So I got the price tag there. I got them on sale. This one I got full price because I really want to get into hat making and be better at it, and just got books just full of really good patterns. Like, this is probably one of the most prolific knitters I know of. And I mean, these socks, I mean, how could you not be swayed about this? The colorways kind of remind me of what I'm doing in my socks now, which is probably why I also love these socks, because I just love those colors. It's insane how pretty they are. So anyway, she's got so many books out, it's absolutely ridiculous. This is her second sock book. She makes a calendar every year full of patterns. She probably has other books as well. I really don't have an overview. She's got a web shop as well, just super productive. It's really impressive. I just want to show you some of the hats in here because they are really the appeal. You can see this like fold in the beginning here. It's a really nice colorwork hat. At the back as well, you see this lace and cable hat. It's really good. Unfortunately, I think these are one of the books that I have that are only in Norwegian. It's not that traditional based, which is kind of refreshing to see something that's Norwegian but doesn't necessarily highlight tradition that much. I do love my traditional Norwegian knitting. There's another hat that's really gorgeous. But it's nice to see that people who are kind of where I'm coming from as a knitter making other things as well, because it suits my knitting style. And also yarn availability, at least. They tend to be adapted to more affordable yarns, and if you are uncomfortable with substituting yarns, I am not, but if you are, it's really good to have those books available that recommend that you use yarns that you can get in your local shop for fairly little money. This book I actually wanted because there is a good selection of colorwork socks here, and they have a lot of other interesting details as well. So look at these, they're just so cool. So it's definitely a source of inspiration. Look at it. Fish socks. So yeah, just giving you teasers now. You can, to my knowledge, as I said, only get them in Norway. These socks were like the socks that swayed me to buying these. I think you can see why. They're just colorwork all over. So yeah, I've never knitted anything from these books yet. I just collect them. So I can't really tell you much about that. I do sometimes miss some bits of information from what I've read in them. Like, I always look for yarn and gauge. It tells me a lot about what the socks will be like, and I sometimes struggle to find that information. But apparently I just wasn't looking hard enough. I think I found gauge for most of them now. and she goes through yarn information quite early on. I really wish though that there would be more information about how to get exactly these colours for these socks, because I'd love to make them. They're more like stockings really, but there isn't any info there, so you kind of have to go out and sort of collect and compare yarns yourself, which, to be honest, I don't hate that idea. So yeah, I really wish I'd used this book a bit more, because it really is quite the resource. But yeah, here you can see there's like a colour wheel. It's using yarn as the example, which I love. It's not like just theoretical, but actually talks about it as yarn. It's knitting specific colour theory, which I really do appreciate. I think Margaret Radcliffe's got something similar, so that's worth looking into as well. Having said that, I've not really sat down with this book in depth, so this is about as much as I can cover, which is why I'm still at the point from just covering books briefly. And we're gonna do that for a while still, until I get to the favourites of mine. So this is in English. I believe it's only in English, I'm afraid, but it's very visual, so if you're not super comfortable with English, I think you can still make very good use of it. So these are my Anbud books, which I thought would be more useful for me when I purchased them, but I have yet to use them, even though I own them for a fairly long time. But I think they are useful though. Like, this book is a guide how to knit top-down sweaters, and it's written in a way that you can use it to make your own. I kind of miss some methods in there, like the contiguous method, but generally it covers the basic ones, and it's super useful if you want to design your own garments. And it gives you these patterns as examples that you can knit without making a pattern of your own. But generally it's just a really cool guide with like sizes and everything. It's super helpful, and when I get into garment design I'll definitely make use of this, because I do prefer knitting top down. So for anyone who's interested in making garments, this is worth gold. And it's been translated into Norwegian. I know it has been, I've seen it on the shelves, so you can get it either way. But yeah, it's not a pattern book, it's more for those of you who wish to make garments from scratch. It does have some patterns, but that's not the main focus of the book. Now this book is interesting because it is a pattern book, but it's focusing on techniques. So the patterns are sorted as patterns, but before that you just go through different ways of making cuffs, heels and toes. And you will be told when those cuffs, heels and toes appear in the book. I don't know how much it focuses on cuffs really. I think it covers some cast-ons, but generally there's a lot of information about the different types of heels. This page just talks about the different heels that you can expect to find in this book and compares them. Like, you don't have to make that comparison yourself across patterns. It will just literally tell you. And here are some heels. I'd rather just show you the pictures as well. It's not going to give away the pattern here, it's just kind of show you the basics of kind of what they look like and how they differ. So it doesn't cover that many techniques, but it's a good beginner sock book, and beginner to advanced, because it doesn't cover that many, so you're not going to be overwhelmed. But it's also expecting that you have some sock knitting knowledge, so maybe if you're done in vanilla sock, this is a very logical next step. I'm yet to knit any patterns from these, but when I do knit from patterns that I'm not happy with, I pick this book up and I see how they did a heel or a toe or something. I do it less now just because I'm more comfortable with what I know what I like. But for a while this was very useful for just looking into techniques. And I'm hoping to knit some specific patterns from that book during the year, because there are some really gorgeous ones. I mean, the one on the outside is just heavenly, but it's got some patterns as well that intrigue me, like these for instance. So that's Anbud. Again, I'm covering these briefly because I've not gone in depth with these books yet, but they are an incredible resource. Now, I got this book, which is called Knitting in Norway. It's an old library book that I was lucky to get my hands on, and it's one of those must-haves if you can get your hold of some second-hand books, which I did. And it just covers just Norwegian history. And you can see the cyber mittens here. Look at that. You can see a full page. Look at that. Oh, I love this book. It's again one of those coffee table books. It's going through history, telling you like how the Marius jumper from the 50s got popularized when AHA was using the original set style cardigan, and it's just really, and made that really trendy again. And you got some, I think these are Sami mittens. They're very popular in like the Nordic parts of Norway and Sweden, Finland, parts of Russia even. It's just such an invaluable book, and I'm so super happy to have it. it's only Norwegian, and I feel really bad about recommending it because you can't get it unless you just go to secondhand bookshops, etc., and try to get your hands on it. But this book you can get, and I think you can get it in both Norwegian and Swedish. Look for it on Ravelry if it's available in English, because I think it might be. I was gonna check this before making this video, but I've not gotten around to it. I'm awfully sorry. And showing you what's inside it is really quick and easy. This is what you're gonna get. I don't remember if this is all of it, but it really covers the scope. It's hats, mittens and socks generally, and it's in a very Nordic style. I think this book is originally Swedish, but I can recognize styles from Norway as well, and so it kind of covers both countries and maybe even Danish knitting. So I find this really cool, and it recommends yarns that it's actually more common outside of Norway. I'm just showing you examples as I'm talking. Like, it recommends black yarns and Shetland wool sometimes. It's a chart. It's a mitten, just showing you very briefly because I can't give away too much, but generally super cool book. I bought it very recently, so I'm very excited about knitting it up, and I've yet to do so, but I can definitely see myself knitting from this book. And then there's this book, which is Stickning. It's a book in Swedish, but turns out it's Vogue knitting. It's a book called Vogue Knitting. I think it's the ultimate knitting book or something like that, and it's just full of techniques, just anything you need to know from beginning to end about knitting. Just, it's such a handy all-rounder book, really. I like this. I'm so happy to finally have it here in the UK, because it's just been resting in Norway for years, and that's just not helpful, because this is a on when you need it type book, you know. It's not a book that you read through, it's a book that you look through when you need certain information. So it's available in Swedish, it's available in English. Don't think it's available in Norwegian, I'm afraid, but hopefully you are okay with reading either Swedish or English. Okay, now we're getting to the really good stuff. My booklets. And we're going to start off with Knitsonic and this book. It's such a treasure. And again, it's something I bought fairly recently, so I'm not used to it fully as a resource. But it tells you so many things about color work and stuff that you need to know, or it's just good to know, and how to be inspired. Like, so yeah, here's another example of how you could just like draw out your charts and then knit them. I can't really show you too much of this because, you know, you should pay for these things, then I can't give away too much. And so I'm doing that a bit sloppily right now, but this is the general idea of what you can expect from this book. And there's just so much knowledge in this book. I am very fortunate to have it, and I look forward to using it more. And that's kind of the common theme so far, because there's books that I haven't used that much, but now we're getting to some of the stuff that I have. It's Kate Davies. So I got 4 Kate Davies booklets. Now, it kind of saddens me to say that I've had more use for her first 2 booklets, Yokes and Colours of Shetland, more so than her later ones, which is Haps and the one that's named after her Scottish yarn that I can't pronounce. So these 2 I have very limited knowledge of yet, I'm afraid. I wasn't super keen on like how the Haps are being presented here. It's a lot of really nice history, but the photography is a bit so-and-so. I think it's because just the different designers did their photography separately, whereas Kate Davies and her husband they always have the best pictures, so they really just should have just sent it to her. But then you got this book, which I found a bit underwhelming on the pattern side, I'm afraid. So covering these very briefly, if there are any Kate Davies booklets you should get, is these 2. So I've already sort of started to prepare for buying yarn for the Ursula cardigan at Edinburgh Yarn Fest. I'm gonna knit this. I will. But you know, of course, that I have lots of other cardigan plans, so it's just gonna have to wait a little. But from this book, I have, of course, knitted the epistrophe cardigan. Here we are. So this cardigan I already made, and it was a pleasure. My only concern, again, it's the same thing that I had with this yoke, possibly due to my very short row gauge that I can't do anything about, is that it's very short in the neck and it's very tight up in the armpits. So just add some more rows under and do some more decreases up here. I would have done that for that as well had I just realized. Kate Davies, you guys. Oh, I want to talk about Kate Davies more another time. She was just one of the first designers I came across on Ravelry, and I was so happy to find her designs because I I guess I had a bit of a culture shock when I went to Ravelry the first time and just found that knitting outside of Norway is just so different. And then I find Kate Davies, and it's sort of bridging the gap. And that, yeah. I could say so many nice things about Kate Davies, and I look so much forward to seeing her stand in Edinburgh Yarn Festival. I can't even tell you. So here's my other Vogue knitting book. It's Knitopedia. I think this is also an old library book that someone sold on Amazon. Yeah, definitely. It's just an encyclopedia. You look up knitting terms like, what's LYS? This acronym is an abbreviation for local yarn shop, and it just has a little paragraph from that. It's got a selection of clothes down here. See that? So an all-round knitting book. So I got 2 of Vogue's all-rounders, and I think that's all you need really. Just having said that though, who's to say that I'm not going to buy more of these kinds of general knitting books? I've kind of been eyeballing Principles of Knitting. Maybe I should get that. This book I got for Christmas for myself. It's a very new book. I believe it's only available in Swedish. Again, I forgot to say. Kate Davies patterns only in English. The Vogue Knitopedia only in English. This book only in Swedish thus far. Wouldn't be surprised if they translated it into Norwegian, because it's been a big hit there already. Again, I have not knitted anything from this yet because it's so new. I mainly focused on bringing my new books to the UK. That's why that is. I got more books back in Norway that I have knitted from. But yeah, here's some charts. It's just full of charts at the back. I love, that's probably my favorite part of the book. But it's generally focused on patterns. In the beginning, you just get lots of really lovely photography of said patterns. So I just don't want to give away too much because the photography is also kind of part of the book. But I mean, look at that. Oh, I love that cardigan so much. So I'm gonna put down here what her Instagram name is, because she's got a gorgeous Instagram account, which is probably how, you know, she's managed to promote this book as well as she has, because she's really young and such a prolific knitter already. So that's just really good to see, and I am so inspired by this book. I don't even know where to start. Okay, we're getting to the bigger books where I got more things to say, and these 2 books are the funniest stranded knitting books I have ever seen. They're by Jorid Linvik, and I believe this book has already been translated into English. It's originally in Norwegian. I think she started off by being a Ravelry designer, and now she has more in her books than on Ravelry, I think. Look on Ravelry to get these patterns translated. I believe this book will be translated soon because it's in the same series, so that just makes sense. But look at these patterns, and this is just the kind of patterns you can expect to get in this book. So I can't see my camera, so I'm just kind of hoping that you can see the book. And this is the sock equivalent of the mitten book, so I am more acquainted with the mitten book. But the socks are basically, you can get matching socks and mittens, essentially. That's the idea. Oh, look at these, look at that. And these are the Moo mittens for adults. Oh, I just love them. These mittens I find so inspiring, it's unreal. So if I was going to cover these books at length, I'd just literally show you every pattern, and we don't have time. This episode's gone on long enough already. Consider this like bonus material, to be honest. I just really love these books, and I look forward to having a go at them because it's just so much fun stranded knitting in these, and you can get motifs that is really encouraging when you're going to start stranded knitting. I'm really sorry that I talk to you as if you don't do stranded knitting. I know lots of you do, but I also know lots of you don't do it yet. And when I started stranded knitting, my first pattern, like proper mitten pattern, was the Horatio and Oren mittens on Ravelry, and they're just mittens that have owls on them. And having this picture appearing as I was knitting, I literally couldn't go to bed. It was so exciting, and that's really how I got hooked on colour work. So yeah, we have this book. It's a fairy tale mitten book, and I have talked about this before. It's just full of mittens that are inspired by fairy tales that are well known in Norway, but they're also known elsewhere. Like this is about the 3, oh, I don't know what they call it. You know that, like the 3 goats that are crossing a bridge and there's a troll underneath? You probably heard it. Lots of different designers that are well known on Ravelry. You can look up this book there to see which designer made which mittens. I have made some actually. I made 2 pairs of mittens with this. So this book I can talk a bit more about. I made these mittens in Viking yarns, and they're by Tore Seierstad, and like the size, that's my hand. She's got different sizes. and they always fit. Usually mitten patterns just always have something a bit off, like maybe the mitten hole is a bit too far down, something like that, but they always fit. Oh, I love these mittens so much, the Northern Star mittens, and they're by Eventyrvotter, and she is probably no doubt my favorite mitten designer. I'll have to talk about my favorite designers at length in some episode. Let me know how you feel about that, if I should go more in depth. And I also made these mittens. I use a more yellow than a gold yarn, but generally they turn out the same. So yeah, this book, it's so good. It's got so many fantastic different techniques, very well explained. It's such good variation of things, and it's very exciting. All the colors are so much fun. There's a picture at the back here where you can see the different mittens a bit better. These are not all of them by all means, but yeah, it's a small book, but it's got so much in it. Do not underestimate it. That's all I want to say. As for translations, you will have to look up this book on Ravelry to find the different designs, and there you can see if it's available in English to download there. It might not be, in which case you could perhaps ask the designer to request it, but chances are they have decided not to translate it because they haven't done it so already. But it doesn't hurt to show your interest in a polite way, of course. This book, you guys, is a booklet full of Latin mittens, and I did not realize when I ordered this, and this was really hard to get. Latin mitten booklets are much easier to get hold of now. This one even, you can get loop. But when I got this, it was really difficult to get, and I had to order it for really, like, it's really expensive from America, and yeah. And when I got it, I did not realize it's not the most helpful book. It's basically full of charts like this, and you have to figure out your stitch count and your gauge and the size of the mittens. It really only gives you the charts and expects you to do the rest of the job. I want to show you the mittens. The updated version that I have has a little booklet in the middle with how the mittens might look, which is helpful, because otherwise how do you know, really? So you kind of just have to go by the images and put them together, which I wish it was more helpful. See these black and white mittens here? If I can make these and make them fit, I've achieved the greatest mitten knitting achievement there is. That's all I want from knitting, just to do those. Just show you the other mittens as well. Yeah, we're gonna cover Latin mittens a bit more, just you wait and see. But for now, I just wanted to talk about this before getting to the big mitten book. Again, only in English to my knowledge, and probably also Latvian, to be perfectly obvious. Don't think it's in Norwegian, but stay tuned if you're interested in knitting Latvian mittens with Norwegian textbooks. I love these books so much. So this is the first book that was released. There's a little poster here because apparently I plan to knit something, I don't know. So it's a blogger who just started showing off her cardigans because she really just liked this sort of old-fashioned stuff, and people were really interested and wanted to know which patterns there were so that they can make it. And just she and a couple others just started collecting patterns, mainly on Facebook, and they put it all together into a book. And it is one of the best Norwegian knitting books. Like, look at this. Look at them. Oh. That was the same cardigan, just in a different sort of context. So cool. Oh, I love them. And the one on the front I've been working on for ages. You can see that on my Ravelry page as well. I love this cardigan. It's in my queue actually. But I'm concerned about the size. I'm just gonna say that. I've been recording for so long, you guys. I'm kind of just unable to show my enthusiasm about this book. But I love it. Oh my god, oh my god, oh my god. I love this pattern. I started casting on the sleeve of this once, but I was just getting some things wrong, so I stopped knitting it, and it's not considered a project anymore. But I want to make it so bad. Oh, got the yarn for it and everything. Here's another picture of the cardigan I've been working on. So you get the general idea. It's just a book packed full of stranded knitting cardigans, commonly referred to as a kofter in Norway, so it's a Votteboka. And of course it was so popular they came up with a second one. I was hoping there'd be a third one last year. That was like red. I was really hoping for that, but that didn't happen. Hopefully next year I want another one. I love these so much. I mean, look at it. How adorable. Oh. And this one too is just really interesting and different. There is another version of it as well, or a similar one with different colors. Here we are. this one, and that's the one that Christian made. I showed you a couple of episodes ago. And I have actually made something from this book, believe it or not. I made it this summer and it was this, but I made it as a jumper instead. I made it for my mum and she actually wears it quite frequently. I love this one so much. I also love the whole aesthetics of these books. Like, there are some other cardigan books in Norway that I'm not that keen on, and part of that is just because the aesthetics of the actual books and the photography and the styling, it's just not my thing. Other people love them, I just don't. But these, they just look so good. Like the setting that they're being photographed in, and the colors chosen in the cardigans, the way that the models are styled and just look like normal people. I love it. I love everything about this. I can't really put it into more words. And it saddens me that they only exist in Norwegian, and it seems unlikely that they will be translated into English, and I'm really sorry. What you could do is look up the publisher, email them and tell them you would be really interested in having this book in English. If enough of you do that, I'm sure like they will realize there's an interest for it, and I'm sure there are English publishers that will be interested in taking it on. People just need to communicate these things back and forth, and I guess you could help that on the way if you contact the publishers. It's certainly worth trying. These are one of the other cardigan books that has sort of come along with the sort of cardigan wave that's been going on in Norway. It's part of how knitting books are really, the whole knitting trend, to be honest, in Norway is really different from what you can find in the UK. It's very much based on tradition and stuff that was sort of recycled in the sort of post-war era in the 50s and 60s that was popular before that again, and the 1800s during the sort of romanticism, and it's just coming back again now, and it has resulted in a number of books that are based on traditional colorwork knitting, and this is one of those. And these cardigans are from Sandnes Design, and they have just published cardigan patterns since ages ago. I don't know even when they started. They were certainly part of the big sort of 50s hype with the Marius jumper and everything, and Satistar. I just want to show you some of them. So it's kind of funny because the cardigans are linked with certain places, so it's basically Norway from south to north. So we're starting with Lindesnes, and that's the most southern point in Norway, and it's the Lindesnes cardigan. This is the Sandnes cardigan itself. And Sandnes is a place in Norway. It's sort of southwest. It's a really lovely place. So they never seem to understand my funky dialect there. Oh my god, I love this one so much. It's the Rygga cardigan. Look at that. Oh, I love it so much. I want to make that. And there's a yoke version of it, and that really appeals to me. So kind of want to do the yoke. And I could stick it now that I've got so much pure wool. I don't need the sewing machine anymore, which I have been kind of dependent on before. There's the classic Satistar cardigan, here done in white and in black, which is more traditional, and it just goes from south to north. So eventually you have, it's kind of disappointing though that this bit here is like the south and the remaining little flap is from where I'm from and north, which is like most of the country in terms of that like surface area. So this is the Ergeseter cardigan. I don't know if there are many Ergeseters around, but that's certainly a place in my hometown, so it could be named after that. And at last it ends with the Nordkapp cardigan, which is the northernmost point in Norway, and it's just a really clever way of laying it out. And it's a very different aesthetic to the other cardigan book, but I like it too. I like the really clean finish of this. It does also cover something a bit about sort of wool production history in the beginning, because that's what they do. Sandnes, they make wool, spin yarn. Not necessarily as Norwegian as they would claim though, unfortunately. But nonetheless, I would definitely recommend this book. It's however one of those books that nobody's thought to translate because they don't think people are interested outside of Norway. You can however get this book in Norwegian from SKD Yarns. But again, if you really want it to be published, I think us as knitters have to be vocal about it and show that it's popular. We can show it on Ravelry, of course, by knitting it anyway, which is a challenge when it's not translated, and you can contact publishers. And there might be other ways that I don't know about because I'm in the fortunate position of being able to understand both English and Norwegian. Okay, we have 4 books left. And these are the books I want to talk about a bit more in depth. I did talk about the cardigan books in depth as well, because I really do love them a lot. I think at least I didn't actually cover all the ones I made. You know, the one with the white and blue squares? I made actually a small version of that in red for a 1-year-old. So I should put a picture up here. I keep forgetting what I made. That's embarrassing. But let's talk about this book now. I love this book. Again, it's kind of cleverly sorted from where they're from or inspired from southern Norway to northern Norway. I'm just kind of trying to lay them out here, and these are all the mittens that are in the book. So I'm actually just going to show you the back, I think, just to give you the idea of what you can get here. Is it focusing on the book or on me? I don't know. It's kind of wishy-washy, because like these mittens should be more up here, but obviously there aren't any mittens from there, so you just kind of have to move them around. But I think it's a very clever layout to just show you kind of where they're from. So you see the most northernmost mittens, they definitely have a very Sami look aesthetics to them. Oh, there are so many things I want to say about this book. I really love it. It's such a resource about history and redesign. This is a very sort of typical what you can expect. I have made the books on the front cover, but as you may remember, they turned out a bit too small, so I have given them away. But regardless, it's such a good book, and has a more interesting yarn choice array that many other Norwegian knitting books may not have. It's still largely Norwegian yarns. Interestingly, I mean, this one's like thin 2-ply yarn from Gammel Norsk Spel from Selbu Spinneri, and that's a very sort of obscure yarn spinner that you have to try a bit hard to get your hold of that yarn. But sometimes it will also recommend the sort of matte finish merino yarn that I spoke about in my episode, and you can use that for sure. I did use merino for these, and that was not the issue. If it's knit at a tight gauge and it's not too glossy, I don't think merinos are that problematic. This shares like the top spot of my favorite knitting books ever. Latvian mitten books, and it's such a bible, honestly, and it's been translated into Norwegian, so I'm happy to say this book you can get in both English and Norwegian. It doesn't come as a surprise, obviously, that I, 1, forgot to say, and 2, that book, the mitten book, is only in Norwegian. The designer of that book is fairly active on social media, so you could get in touch and ask about translations. I mean, you can't just demand them, of course, but you can express an interest, and she can maybe gauge whether there's enough interest for her to translate them. It's worth a try. It might be a publisher issue as well, so you might have to get in touch with the publisher. I'm just kind of brainstorming ideas to get patterns more translated than they are at the moment. You can't just expect it to happen, of course, but showing interest always helps. But like I said, available in English and Norwegian, and it's just the best resource for Latvian mittens. There is really nothing quite like it. You get the chart on one side, the mitten on the other, and it's so inspiring. It's just crazy how inspiring this book is. I love this book. I want to marry this book. Can I marry this book? Can I? My goal for this year is to knit from this book. I'm going to do baby steps. I'm going to start with my mitten kits from the Knitting and Stitching show in London, but then I'm going to have a go at this book, because then I should have a fairly much better idea about stitch count in gauge in order to fit my hands and where to put the thumb hole. Luckily they don't do thumb gussets, but still I would need to know where the thumb hole should go. I guess I've still covered these books fairly briefly. I could go even more in depth about them, one book at a time, in future episodes. So if there's any books from this run through that you wish I would talk more about, you can let me know when I can mention it on its own in another episode. I'd be happy to do that. Moving on, it's the Marius book, and again one of those books that's not been translated. But having said that, individual patterns from here and the other Marius books, because there are 2 books, and you can check and look for them, find out which ones they are on Ravelry, and then look for them on SKD Yarns, because there they are translated. It's just that the whole book is only in Norwegian, I'm afraid, and it's just full of Marius patterns. They're all based on Marius. I'm just gonna skip to the back where, well, here someone made Marius sweater for their dogs. I did not use a pattern like this, but it looks fairly similar to the one I did sort of make up based on the drops pattern that I found that did not have Marius on it. yeah, you get lots of photography as well about what other people have done with the Marius pattern. It's really, really cool. I love this book. It's such an inspiration, which is of course why it's called Marius Inspiration. And it has this pattern in it as well because it's designed by the same designer, although it's different. And that's kind of what sets this book apart from the other Marius book, is that it ends with completely different patterns, but from the same designer, and they have as much as a nostalgic link with Norwegian knitters as the Marius pattern does. Like, this is the fauna, and so popular, really. There's of course the classic Satin Star cardigan. This is a really popular one that both me and Arctic Knitting and Nordic Stitches are making for their kofta along. I'm just kind of tagging along, not posting anything. Here's the cardigan I'm wearing, so you get the idea. It's just packed of Marius garments and stuff you can knit for your home with Marius stuff. Again, really recommend looking for patterns for this on Ravelry. It's just really good. It's a hard choice between this one and the other one, but I do think this is the best one. But neither of them actually cover the full range of Marius patterns that there are out there, even though Sandnes are behind both of them, like both sets of patterns, and there are even patterns still not included in either book. So it's kind of annoying, but you really should get both books to get the full coverage, like 95% of the patterns at least. But they do have some patterns in common as well, so if you're not interested in having everything, getting one will probably do. And there's the Cerebral book that I talked about earlier in the episode, and now we're going to talk about it a bit more in depth. So the way this is structured, and I should preface this by saying, only available in Norwegian. Really sorry. It's possible to order, I think, in other countries. And it's not a complete waste, because let me talk about how this is laid out. So the beginning is a lot about history and technique, what classifies a proper Cerebral mitten. So that's this bit here. It's a fairly sizable portion of the book, right? However, from here on out, it's all charts. I think the charts go from this big chunk, which is pretty good. So the thing that's laying down here now is the written bit. This is all charts. Let me just show you. Like, it's such a treasure. This, it might be my favorite book over the Latvian mitten book. Did I say that out loud? In the end, it comes with actual mitten patterns. Show this at the distance, because we don't do any mean copyright things here now, do we? And at last, there's just a really lovely picture of like all the crazy things you can do with this pattern. And this has been a huge inspiration for my mitten pattern. I say that as if it is the greatest mitten pattern ever. I made it to be really, really simple and a very generic pattern, and you can find mittens in this that look almost exactly like it. I didn't actually see those until later, which was kind of embarrassing. But with my mittens, you can knit them very quickly, because I chose an even looser gauge than you can find commonly. So I will definitely use that book as a resource more in the future patterns. I'm actually already looking into it to find some old colorwork bits and pieces that I'm going to put on some socks and use them in a very different way, which I'm very excited to show you. But for now, we have covered all my books. I didn't cover them in as much detail as I wished, partly because you have to pay for these books, so there's only so much I can show you, partly because I have been blabbering for hours and I have work to do, exams to mark and videos to edit. Still waiting that parcel from Germany with hedgehog fibers and Regia yarn. It's gonna be hard to concentrate when I know it's on the way to me. Anyway, as I said before, if there's anything you want me to cover in depth, then do let me know. I can talk about a single book in more detail and answer specific questions that you might have. Because obviously when you buy a book, you buy it for certain purposes, and you want to know if that book serves your particular purpose, and I am happy to go over that in a future episode. This turned out to be a separate portion, so I hope you don't mind. Yeah, you're welcome, I guess, for having this little extra bit, even though that means you have to watch my podcast for a bit more. Hope to see you next week in an actual full episode, and I will see you then. Bye!